Welcome to the Sharpe Crew. It is a little bit past noon on the East Coast. Yes, Wednesday afternoon, which means we have to be here on the Sharpe Crew talking that awesome talk for our afternoon chat. Here with, of course, always the one, the only, Michael Vass. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's going to be a fun show today, I think.
I hope. It usually is, isn't it?
Yes, it is, actually.
Absolutely, yes. And also the one and only Charla Burnett, PhD. How are you?
Doing well. The world's a little bit hectic right now, though, so I'm looking forward to discussing that.
And for those people who are watching, of course, you know I always keep in the show notes the details for both of our amazing, awesome guests here today. And of course, you can follow Michael on Twitter at MV Consult. You can follow Charla at Instagram at Venture Novelist. Today's chat is about what everybody is talking about, which is foreign policy. It has dominated the news over the weekend. If any of you punish yourselves by watching cable news, as I do, you know it is on every cable news channel. It's all over Twitter. It's all over, or X, whatever you want to call it. It's all over every place, talking about foreign policy, the war in Israel. The war in Ukraine has kind of calmed down a bit because of the war hasn't calmed down, but the coverage of the war has calmed down because of Israel. The coverage of many things have calmed down because of Israel, and people are taking stances everywhere. My worry, though, as always, with foreign policy, is it is often driven not by what is right for the countries we're supporting, but often for what is right for either our ideology or economics. It affects our security. It affects our domestic policy. It affects so much. Michael, this has been a big thing for you. You've talked about foreign policy since I've known you. This has been a thing you've been talking about, right? Since I've known you.
18
so
years.
Tell me, where is your head on this?
Foreign policy is one of the most important things that affect us and is one of the least common things. Most Americans think, well, if it's not happening in America, it doesn't matter. It always has an impact on us. It is directly part of our economy and our national security. And we're seeing that here in Israel, 1,600 civilians killed, including 14 Americans. We are now getting some of the messages out of the thousands of individuals who have been taken hostage. We know at least a couple of Americans have, and that number will go up.
They're doing hostage taking. That's right. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. So that will go up to either the dozens, possibly the hundreds of Americans, as well as people from other countries like Germany, like France, like the United Kingdom. This is just one big example. This is why we have to pay attention, and why in our presidential elections, it's usually half of a segment of a debate. This really needs to be a focus. Because when we have a strong president, when we have a strong nation, the rest of the world calms down. When we don't, this is what we get.
Charlotte, go ahead. I know you've dealt with refugees in the past, right? And I think you still do, if I remember that right. But I know you have in the past. Do you have a similar outlook?
I mean, outside of refugees as our foreign policy, obviously, our entire outlook and the way that we think about the world and our position in it has to do with our foreign policy and who's in office and their perspective on it. Essentially, for a lot of Americans, we only hear a small amount of the rhetoric regarding foreign policy. Lots of times we only hear about it only once there is a war happening or violence is occurring. And then again, it disappears kind of into the backdrop. And this is why, to really be educated on this specific topic, you need to be looking at news agencies outside of the United States. So for most of the time when I'm talking about the news, I'm talking about, the BBC, France 24, just anything out there, DW, so that you can get an alternative perspective on what's happening. And so watching and listening to the rhetoric here, particularly about Ukraine or about Israel, Palestine, from like Fox News or CNN is completely different than what the way that the rest of the world is talking about it for the most part.
What you're saying, if I could touch real fast on those two things, one of them is, I think you're right. Most Americans can't name the country on the map until we bomb it, right? Then all of a sudden we can find it on the map because no one talks about it, right? That's number one. I think you're right on that one. The second one is, I found that with the Ukraine war, I found that looking at, one side of Ukraine, people who support Ukraine, the war is going great. Ukraine is destroying the Russians. The Russians are about to collapse. and then I watched someone's pro-Russian. Ukrainians have no chance. Ukrainians are going to go under. They're losing the war. And so your point's a valid one. How do I know which one is even close to correct? Are both of them off? Do I have to kind of mix them together to get the right answer? And I think it's the same thing, right? One second, Mike, because in New York City, you see the protests. You got one side saying everything Israel does is wrong, they're evil, terrible, and the other side saying everything Palestinians do is wrong, they're evil, terrible. I guess I'm validating what you're saying, Charla. That's all I'm saying. Keep going. I apologize.
Yeah, and I think it becomes so. I taught international relations and U.S. politics at the college level, and I find that for the most part, we really struggle to understand and parse through these like bipolarity of the narratives that we often hear. And it usually is a mix of both, right? There is no one-sided war. Everyone in a war is trying to protect their interests. Whether or not those interests are valid is questionable, but there will always come back to, we have to do this to survive. We have to do this to expand so that we have our own safety and protection. And that's kind of the realism that we often lean on when regards to talking about international relations, where everything is a security concern. And that often allows us to make blanket statements about what we should or shouldn't be doing internationally. So particularly in politics and in the media, you're going to hear the same kind of buzzwords over and over and over again, because they only have this framework to discuss it in. And it's very different for the people who are on the ground actually experiencing the issue when they don't actually have a say in how that issue is handled or resolved. And for me, I worked with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for a year during the Gaza war in 2014. I arrived 3 days before the Israeli boys' bodies were found in the West Bank, which kind of launched an air raid of an offensive into the West Bank and into Gaza. And Gaza and Hamas retaliated by launching over 600 rockets into all parts of Israel and into the West Bank, because the tools that they have are not the best. And so they were hitting Palestinians as well as Israelis. And I think specifically for that situation, many people don't understand that there are Palestinians living in Israel who are taking part in society at various levels. They also don't understand that
Christians, by the way, too.
There are Christians, there are Muslims, there are Bedouins, there are Druze who believe in reincarnation. There are literally it's a microcosm for the entirety of all the world's religions. But we often forget that, right? There are actually Israelis or Jewish people living in the West Bank, not just settlers. There are Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, I didn't know that. That is new for me. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So it really is the place, and has been for centuries, that people go to apostatize and to talk about religion. And so while you're there, unless you actually travel within the West Bank, the narrative is very one-sided towards Israel. And especially if you are Jewish and you're going there on Aliyat to make that confirmation, they really curate what you see. And they don't allow you. It's actually illegal for Israelis to go into the West Bank, even despite there being a settlement. There are signs at each of the crossings telling you that it's illegal for you as an Israeli to go over there. Yet you have these Israelis who are settlers, often from the West, often from France.
Well, hold on. We're going down a long road, and Mike's about to yell at me if I don't let him talk. So let Mike get in here real fast. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's a few things. First of all, most people, when we're talking about international politics, most of the mainstream news media don't think, and most Americans don't think about international politics. Again, this is why it's, even in our elections, it's a subdued subject. So yes, I agree with all the news sources you mentioned, including the Japan Times, the Hindustan Times, the Times of Israel are also wonderful sources that I use, and I think everyone should be reading when it comes to international news. To answer your question, Larry, how do you know which side is giving you the right side? The answer is you read that same subject, read it in 3 different, just real simple. Go to 3 different articles. One from the United States mainstream media, which is going to be very biased. and then pick 2 of the internationals. Read the same story. You'll get very different information, but it's the accumulation of all of those. If you can't get to an original source, like someone actually giving a speech, then read those 3, and between those, you'll be able to figure out the main crux of what is the essential truth of that situation. That's the way you understand truth in the news media and try and work out that bias. I disagree that the bias is towards Israel versus Gaza. It depends on what you're looking at. If you look at anything that has to do with academics or is left-leaning, they are bleeding hearts for the Hamas, which is a terrorist organization funded by Iran. And they love to pour out and say how evil Israel is in every media outlet that they can possibly get it on, and try and twist each of the stories to try and promote that. Now, Hamas is recognized as a terrorist organization.
I watch mainstream media. Mainstream media is not pro-Hamas at all.
And they're not
liberal either. Is not at all.
I never said that liberal people believed that it was pointed towards a pro-Israel stance, first off. Second, mainstream media in the United States is predominantly conservative and will usually always take the side of Israel. You very rarely.
When it comes to this one, she's right, Mike. When it comes to Israel, she's 100% right.
If you're looking at liberal news outlets that are mostly like in blog form, then yes, you might hear an alternative to that that's pro-Palestinian. I think, though, that people are often, again, confused about what's actually happening on the ground, because most of the people living in Gaza are not actually Palestinian. They're Egyptian. And when they fled over the border during the Egyptian-Israel conflict, they got trapped in Gaza.
So I wouldn't say trapped. They were
trapped there. They're not allowed to leave. They're not allowed
Egypt won't let them in.
Egypt doesn't want them either, because they don't want Hamas. They have their own Islamic terrorism issue that they have to deal with, so they don't want that either.
True.
And they don't want to get into any conflict with Israel because they're them harboring terrorists that want to fight against Israel.
It gets very complicated. No one wants
complicated and nuanced issue, and that's why I think that a lot of people are misinformed and make their decision on who they would like to support or how that support is being implemented, because they're making that basis off of.
Well, let me make myself very clear, straight up. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am definitely pro-Israel. I am definitely against Hamas, which is funded by Iran. They're a group of terrorists. The latest thing that they did is absolutely unequivocally an act of terrorism. There is no justification for it, period. And I am very much understanding and supportive of Israel's response to this, because it is that they are going through what is on par with our 9/11 and is ongoing. And I want to make myself very clear. There is no question in my mind about it.
I feel like this is more in line with the Vietnam's Tet Offensive. And I brought this up yesterday when I was on my radio show. This, to me, reminds me of the Tet Offensive. And for those of you who don't know, during the Vietnam War, the Northern Vietnamese in 1968 all of a sudden made a massive, what would be thought of as a more conventional battle in South Vietnam. Prior to 1968, most of the fighting in Vietnam had been more guerrilla warfare, ambush tactics, things like that against the American military. There weren't that many actual all-out campaigns and battles that you would think of as warfare, direct warfare. The Tet Offensive changed that. Now, in the long run, the Tet Offensive completely failed. Militarily, it completely failed. The Americans were able to defeat them completely, take back Hue City, take back all the cities, destroy most of the Viet Cong. It was a tactical and military failure. But politically, it was a home run. Politically, that was the battle that made Americans go, I think we're done with this war. And that's really one of the major turning points that made America begin to not support it anymore. Americans began to walk away from Vietnam at that point. The policies began to do that. And that was it. The de-Americanization of the war, right, happened after the Tet Offensive. That really was a thing. Mm-hmm. My concern here, Michael, is what they're doing isn't 9/11-ish. It's a Tet Offensive-ish, which they're trying to get people to stop supporting, right? And not supporting the war, but supporting peace efforts.
Well,
that is what I think it is.
Well, from Iran's point of view, and they've come out and they've made their statements, and Hamas directly made their statement, that the entire reason why they've committed this act of terrorism, mass terrorism against civilians, was because Israel was based off of the Abraham Accords that were put forth by President Trump, continuing his efforts there. Israel has been in negotiations with Saudi Arabia to commit peace. And because Saudi Arabia was looking to move forward and they are enemy of Iran, Hamas has now taken the action to go to war, to commit this act of war. So it's very interesting in that respect. But we've seen this multiple. What we're seeing now is very similar to what we've seen in Afghanistan, what we've seen in Iraq, what we've seen in Ukraine. This is, very briefly, I've been talking about this for 2 years. We are not looking at World War III. We are looking at 3 simultaneous regional wars. We have the European faction, which is Russia and Ukraine, which will continue and it will expand over the next 10 years. We have what's happening in Southeast Asia, which is China invading into Taiwan, with their puppet state, North Korea, going after South Korea. And we have Japan, which is so terrified, and they're so also afraid of China that they're building their first army since 1945. That's the Southeast Asia. The Middle East is a third simultaneous war. And that's why we have seen Russia and Iran and China and North Korea working together, not because they have a similar ideology, they hate each other, but they're working together to take down the United States, both economically as well as in terms of a national threat, directly, physically, and all of our allies as well. And that's what we are seeing right now. And you will see the accumulation of that, I believe, by 2028. This is why international politics is so important. And that's why we are seeing what's happening right now.
So let me grab, if I could, I want to grab a couple of comments. If I could, people are popping up in here. I'm going to grab a couple of them. So Austin absolutely likes us. He says, hello to my favorite people on my favorite panel from Kentucky. Look at that. We have some fans.
Hey, Austin.
He goes on to ask the question, is Palestine majority Sunni or Shiite? If Sunni, I believe they're Sunni, if not mistaken. Why is Iran helping them when Iran is mostly Shiite? It's a good point, right? Religiously, I think, someone could fact check me, but I'm pretty sure Palestine is majority Sunni. Go ahead.
I just want to be forward with the reality on the ground is that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a religious war. It is a war of resources.
No.
Yes, it is.
No,
because the West Bank is where the majority of the mineral resources are in the country. They make over $3.8 billion a year from the minerals that they mine out of the West Bank. This is about resources. This is about safety and security, but it's not about some historical religious angst between Jewish and Muslim people who lived in peace for many, many years in the region. The issue here was that they were escaping persecution, Jewish people, from the West and from Russia specifically. And they were searching for their homeland, which does have biblical context, but that did not put them at odds with Islam. And in Islam, actually living amongst Christians and Jewish people is a part of what you're supposed to be practicing and doing. Because
but hasn't it become that though, Charla?
No.
I think you're right.
That's a cop-out context. I think that's a cop-out context. No. I also think it allows religious leaders to galvanize people around a specific context that's not real. The reality is that every day Palestinian people live under occupation. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've lived with them. I've seen it. I was married to an Israeli as well. So I'm also very understanding of the Israeli Jewish context. But the issue is that since 2008, over 6,000 Palestinians have been killed under occupation. So yes, Hamas did on Saturday, 306 since 2008 up until this specific offensive by Hamas, it would only been 300. So when you're putting this into context about numbers, you have to be understanding that these people, when they're living under occupation, any goods and services into their community is tightly controlled by Israel. Could you imagine if the United States was seized and that we weren't allowed to get access to resources that we need, that we weren't allowed to work, that we weren't allowed to travel?
Hold on, guys, hold on. I'm not at all saying that at its core, it's based upon some type of resources or something. I'm not at all saying that's not true. That absolutely could be true. Because
And
the point
power,
being,
because
No.
people like Netanyahu and
No.
Hamas, they maintain power by keeping the conflict
No,
going.
let
It's
me-
the same
let
reason
me
why the
cut-
Palestinian
wait a minute.
Authority
No, I
didn't
gotta cut you
take
off.
their two-state solution.
okay.
No,
That's
wait a minute.
why
Couple
they
things,
keep
couple
denying
things.
a two-state
Wait a
solution.
minute. No,
I just want to finish my point, guys. I want to finish my point. I'm not saying you're wrong on this. Michael
I am.
is. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, even if it is about resources and power, which I think it's always about power no matter what, right? Whether that's religious, it's always about power. But regardless, hasn't it become, for the average person on the ground, right, a more of a, because I hear people who support Palestine and who support Israel say horrible things
No, you have
about the other.
ultra-Orthodox Jewish people who refuse to serve in the
Guys,
Israeli
please,
state. Who don't
let me
believe
go.
in the
Let me
Israeli
go.
state.
I just want to say, hasn't it become that, particularly outside of Israel, particularly because of that? Because I hear people say, Roy says it himself. This is about Roy. He says, Hamas itself said it wants to eradicate Jews from the region.
And a lot of
And
Israelis
I have
want to kill
seen-
all the Palestinians.
Yes.
Let me make
so
it very.
hasn't it become that? Is my point.
No,
Even
it's
if it
ethnic
isn't
and identity
originally.
based, if anything.
No, let me make it very
Ultra-Orthodox
clear. Wait a
conservative
minute.
Jews living in
Let me
Jerusalem
respond.
do not contribute to the Israeli
Let-
state and refuse to recognize
Let
Zionism.
me respond for a
So-
moment.
Okay, hold on.
because-
All Jewish people
Hold on.
believe in
Let
this
Michael talk.
identity is
let me
false.
Go ahead.
respond
Michael, go ahead,
because
please. Go ahead.
we have to interject some absolute objective fact into this, not opinion, not interpretation. Hamas, in its charter, has stated that they want to end the Jewish state. In their statement about their most recent, because they have had many, but their most recent, this current
They
war
also have
that
no
they
problem killing
created. Let me
Palestinians.
finish my statement. They, in this war, their declaration on why they decided to attack 1,600 civilians, some of them at festivals, unarmed individuals,
Hamas
why
is
they have
not
murdered. And let me
Palestinians don't
finish
even
my
get to have
statement.
festivals.
I was not interrupting you. Let me finish this statement. That they have butchered children, taken Americans hostage, and killed Americans as well as others around the world. Why do they do this intermittently, not hitting military targets? Because their own statement was that they want to kill the Jewish state. They want to kill. It is a religious genocide. To try and say it's about economics or it's about persecution, that isn't the answer.
Hamas
And
does
you
not
can say,
represent
wait, let
Palestinians.
me finish this up, and then I will be happy to hear you. Now, we can say that the individual people within that country are some of the most beautiful people in the world. I'm absolutely sure. You can say that about people in China. I know that about
We don't
people
have a
in
country.
Russia. I have lived there, so I know many people are salt of the earth. We are talking about governments. This is international policy, and it is the policy of the government of the West Bank, Hamas, and they are run
No, the
by
West Bank and
Iran
Hamas are
to
completely
kill
ran by two
Jews
separate
and to
governments.
kill America. That is their stated, documented, factual point of view. It is religious. It is not economic. And their point of view, which is being directed by Iran, as we have seen, is in action right now. It is irrefutable.
Palestinians are Christian as well as Muslim and Bedouin and Druze and many other religions.
Immaterial.
Hamas is a government that seized control over a conclave of people, 3 million people, in a very small area that you could literally walk from one end to another. It's not hard to maintain. They do not represent the Palestinian people, and they do not
Actually,
represent
they
the
do.
conflict. No,
Who
they
do we
don't.
give him? Who do
The
we give
Palestinian
humanitarian
Authority is
aid to?
completely
Who do we give humanitarian aid to? Governments. Which government of the West Bank do we give the money to? To Hamas.
Palestinian Authority.
It is the no, we give it to Hamas. They are the
I
ruling
was there
government.
with the money. I am the one who was implementing the program.
The
so you
United
can't
States
tell me-
government gives the money to the ruling government. That is Hamas.
The United
And
States gives
Hamas
zero
uses
money
that
to
money
Hamas. The United
what?
States government sees Hamas as a terrorist organization, and
They
they are
are.
unable to give them any money and has been since 2007.
Hamas has two divisions that are part of it.
Hold on, guys.
One-
I want to be clear on
Go
this actively. I want to be clear on this. You're both correct in that America does not directly give Hamas any money. That's 100% accurate. American money does get to Hamas. That's true, but it is not direct. And that's an important distinction. America does not give any money directly to Hamas. They get it through other sources.
Yeah.
I would argue that the money that the United States gives to Palestinians through the United Nations does not directly go to Hamas.
That is a wonderful belief. It is not factually correct. And we have
also
seen
there's
this.
cash
That is
that
the
America
same thing
gives to Iran that gets to Hamas too.
Yeah, they give
There
$100
are
million.
other
They give
countries who
$100 million.
support Hamas, for
Well,
sure.
let's go through some of the facts. We know that Iran gives $100 million directly to Hamas every year. In addition to that, the $6 billion that was just released, separate of the $300 million coming from the Biden-Harris administration, we have the $6 billion that were just given to Iran, and Iran directly on the day they received the monies told the world that they would use the monies not just for humanitarian aid, in fact, not primarily for humanitarian aid, but to be able to advance its agenda, which is a terrorist agenda. This is why they have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they have used that, we believe, and I cannot confirm that at this moment, to help fund this current event, which is why Hamas was able to buy and build 5,000 to
bottom line is you're not going to
8,000
be able to stop
rockets
people
that
from
came
giving money
primarily
to
from
Hamas.
Iran.
You're not going to be able to stop them from getting
It's
money.
true. Yep.
I'm not saying
Bottom
that
line, but do
stop
you
it.
know how
I'm
much money
saying
the United States government has given to Israel?
Israel
$4
isn't
billion
the
a
same
year?
as
Is that
Hamas.
right?
It's been
I think it's $4 billion a year.
$260 billion since
Thank God. Let's
1978.
give them some more.
Since 78. Don't give
Yes.
them more, Mike. Now you're becoming one of them. Don't do that. No.
I would
Don't
rather
give
give the
more.
money to
No.
Hamas. I would rather give the money to Israel, our only ally in the Middle East, the only stable democracy in the Middle East, a nation that is
Are they our
directly
ally
aligned with
when they
America.
forged documents that led to the Iraq War?
What's that?
Like they're responsible for providing us with false information about Saddam Hussein's access to
Oh,
Yellow
no,
Cake.
we're going there.
Excuse me. There were how many nations
proven
that were
facts.
providing?
The documents are
Do you
leaked.
think
The
that
New York
the only
Times did the whole
All right.
expose. There's a movie about
the
it.
New York Times has
okay.
done many things? Doesn't mean it's
This
correct.
is a whole
He
different
does
show,
not
guys.
care about the United
Women.
States. He thinks
Wha-
that we're idiots, and
Who?
he will take advantage of the United States at any means necessary for his own Zionist agenda. Point
Oh,
blank.
okay, that
They are not
is
our allies. If they
No.
thought that it was going to help them to turn any information over to Russia, they would.
you know what what individual governments do in many of their negotiations in foreign policy. There are many things that we and all of our allies do that we do not like. That
We
is
would
the
probably
perspective
have
of
more
wait a
allies
minute,
if
the
we didn't
perspective of the
dominate
government.
them, take their
They do many
resources.
conversations. They give much information. Everyone in the world does. Some of it is valid. Some of it isn't. What you're trying to set up is, oh no, they're doing things behind our back. That's not necessarily true, or any more true than England is doing things behind our back. And yet
This
they're
part
also
I agree
our
completely
greatest
with
ally.
you, Michael. I'm
So-
not mad at Israel for caring about Israel. I'm not mad at Russia for caring about Russia, right? They should care about their own. I get that. But we should care about ourselves too, right? And this is my point I want to bring up that bothers me more than anything else. We're talking about this, and this gives us in America massive distraction from all the other problems that are happening in America, which is why I say it's
That's
more
true.
than just foreign policy. So if Israel wants to do what's in Israel's best interest, I get it. I'm not mad at them. They're Israelis. They should do so. If Palestinians do it's in their best interest, I get it. It doesn't mean we have to be involved, acting like we don't have any problems. We're going to give X billions of dollars to all these countries, to include Israel, right? All this money. And for what? What are we getting? What are we as a people, not as a nation, as a people,
Stability.
what are we getting?
Are we
No,
getting
we're not.
stability? Because
There's
they've
no
destabilized
stability.
the region.
Nothing
Not at the
solved.
moment.
For
Not
the
at the
last
moment.
20
We
years,
haven't-
Not
we
ever.
lost and
Not- well-
the Middle East.
The Middle East is a relative, saying stability and peace in the Middle East is a relative statement, because it always, for 1,500 years, they have been fighting
We
continuously.
have had
It doesn't
no
matter what
problem
nation is.
destabilizing people's countries
Excuse me,
and
they've
then
been
playing the role of
destabilized for
victim.
1,500 years. They have been fighting amongst themselves and
I
everyone
think that, again,
else.
that's a cop-out argument that we
No,
often
that's a
hear
fact.
in
It's
mainstream
a
media. They've just been
historical
fighting for
fact.
hundreds of thousands of years, so it's
So
fine.
is
I
Europe.
don't- It is a fact.
So is Europe.
Well,
the
actually,
point you
no.
brought up,
Europe
Michael,
hasn't been fighting that
Europe.
entire time, and most recently, Europe has actually been peaceful. That is
The
not the case in the
Crusades?
Middle East. You cannot make that same statement. It is
Hold
not
on,
factually
hold on.
correct.
Okay, now I got to step on this one. No, not even close, Michael. Look, Yugoslavian war in the 90s, right? all the fighting
That
in
was not a
Ukraine,
religious war.
Chechnya, that's all European.
now.
Azerbaijan, Armenia. Well, that's kind of Asia. I think that's considered Asia. I think that's Asia. I'm
Okay,
not sure.
and
Anyway, on the
also,
border, either way.
when you're talking about
right?
the former Soviet states after World War II, many of the conflicts that we have seen most recently are because of what happened with Stalin when he decided to take individuals from various parts of the Soviet Union
The
and to
reason
move
doesn't
them
matter.
by
You made a
force into
blanket
new
statement
areas.
saying Europe was peaceful. Europe has been peaceful. Prior to that, we had World War II, World War I, Prussian Wars, French Wars, the French Revolution, Napoleonic Wars,
Okay,
the 7
fair
Years
enough.
That seems
War,
like the
the
only
100
real
Years War,
history taught
the
in
30
school.
Years
have-
We should
War.
at least know that.
Fair enough. Yes, they have had the wars. Perhaps the way I'm trying to explain this is we have seen the religious wars of the Middle East being consistent and being
Those were
internalized
always ruled
as opposed to what we're seeing with
focused on
external
resources,
wars.
though, and colonialization. There was always an offensive, defensive colonialization power between
They're
Europe
colonizing
and
each
the
other.
Middle East. We've
They've had
destabilized
internal
the
wars.
region just as we have Africa for 100 years, and then we go, oh, well, they're just always violent. They're just violent people. Like, that's a cop-out. We keep giving them money. We keep giving them guns. We keep telling them, hey, let's keep the whole area destabilized so that we can keep getting their minerals, so we can keep getting access to their resources.
We're not getting them. China's getting them, for one. And now you're going into Africa, which is an entirely different continent with different
MENA,
issues.
the Middle East region, is the part of the MENA region.
No, the
Northern
Middle East is the
Africa is-
Mediterranean. Northern Africa
You're
is
talking
not
about
normally
religious
considered Africa.
warfare, then of course there's like Islamic terrorism all around Africa.
Yes, there is,
True.
because it's coming from the
True.
Middle East, and it's because when we have weaker presidents and weaker policies, and we start appeasing nations like Iran, then we see the spread and the growth of terrorism. We see the growth and spread of fanatical religious
Hold on.
ideology,
Let me give
that
you
has
a literal example in the last 50 years.
of what?
Again, I'm going back to Vietnam. I guess it's my Vietnam day. I'm going back to Vietnam. We literally spent, the French and then America, we spent decades upon, Japanese too, if you count Japanese, decades upon decades of colonizing Vietnam. We go back before that, the Chinese were trying to colonize Vietnam. Vietnam's been trying to be colonized by multiple nations, both locally and European, for hundreds of years, if not thousands. I don't know details. It could be thousands. If anyone's Vietnamese was telling me that, probably thousands. All of a sudden, 1975, we walk away. We just go, we're done. We're done. We're not doing it anymore. We walk away. 10 years later, we're trading partners. Right now, you can buy furniture from Vietnam. Vietnam is still not a great country when it comes to government. There still is a very aggressive government in many ways. But without question, Vietnam is more stable now than it's probably ever been, except maybe under Chinese occupation 1,000 years ago. Maybe. And that's a maybe. But Vietnam is more stable now. They're a better trading partner now when we just literally walked away. Literally, we just got up and left. That's all we did. We did one nice thing. From so many of the Vietnamese who we created refugees, we took like 200,000 of them or whatever. We took a huge number into our country. And now we have a large population of Vietnamese in America now who, as a general rule, are insanely productive and awesome citizens, right? Doing a great job in our country as a general rule. I think there's an example of us just walking away right there in front of us and the results of it that have shown something very good. Why should we just walk away? That is my point. We should
walk away from Taiwan. We should walk away from the Ukraine. We should walk away from our allies, especially Israel. Is that Israel, isolationism? You're basically detailing isolationism.
There's a difference. We are not isolating Vietnam. We trade actively with Vietnam. This is not a walk away. We actively trade with Vietnam. Actively. So
you
we
want
are not
to actively
isolationists.
Trade with Iran.
Yes. Oh, 100% yes.
Oh,
yes.
God, no.
Yes.
Oh, God,
yes,
no.
I would.
Oh,
Yes.
God, no.
I would. Do we
The
need
very
to give
people
them
who have
guns
been
and
saying for
weapons
40
and access to technology? No,
They don't want access
no.
to they
They
want
do want access to
No, no, no.
technology. They just bought a
What-
bunch of new drones. What are you
No,
talking
they've made it very
about?
clear. They've made it very clear for 4 decades. They've made it clear every time. The Iran nuclear deal, just again, the $6 billion just a couple of weeks ago, they've made it very clear. They want to kill every American. We are the great devil. They want to kill every American.
Because, again,
and in particular, let's be very clear, they want to kill women. Let's be very clear. Iran has made it clear that they want to kill every American for no other reason than you, a woman, you're able to read, write, work, and drive. That is reason enough for Iran under the Ayatollah to kill everyone
right now.
What?
My sisters are cutting their hair in the streets of Tehran
and they're being killed and imprisoned for it. The children,
schoolgirls,
are being poisoned.
Say that is a unique experience to women in any country, it would be a lie.
Women, you mean to tell me that women in Germany, you mean to tell me women in most of Africa, you mean most of the women in the world are being killed right now because they have their hair exposed and because their girls are learning to read.
At one point in our history, that is what happened. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And women are being killed for wearing miniskirts on the streets of America. What are you talking about? That is again that is a cop-out argument for us to protect women as a justification for war.
That isn't a government policy. You're talking about individual actions.
Companies and stop allowing them to lobby.
Now you're mixing. No,
that's foreign policy.
You're mixing individual actions with government-sponsored law and legislation. It is the law of Iran. This is backed by the Iranian government. And again, you can tell me that there are wonderful, good people throughout Iran. I do not doubt that. I do not question that. But the policy is the policy. The leadership is the leadership, and they have expressed their position.
Let me touch a couple of points on this. Number one, we have in some way, shape, or form been either aggressive, belligerent, isolationist towards Iran since 1979, right? So we're talking, what's that? Am I 30, 40 years, give or take, 45 years in that area? For 45 years. Towards Cuba, for what, 70 years? Am I about right? Towards North Korea, for what, 80 years? Something like that. The huge decades. None of it has been better. None of it has worked.
It hasn't changed anything. If anything, it's made it worse. And
my example is
our weapons of death get more great. So we're really just leading up.
Let me stay with me, Charla. Stay with me on this one. So the example I gave, which we did not do, was Vietnam. Vietnam, we did not embargo them, attack them. We just said, we're out. That's all we did. And that one worked. The four examples I gave you, none of them worked. The one example I gave you worked. So I'm saying, let's just walk away. Here's my and I said this literally 20 years ago. And I'm not making this up. I mean, it's 20 years ago on a radio show. 20 years ago, I said this. I said, if we just walked away from Iran, within 20 years, they'll be our trading partner and they won't have mullahs anymore within 20 years. Because the number one thing that happens in every nation for them to have an actual revolution is an active middle class. You don't get an active middle class without trading. So yes, my attack on Iran would be creating a middle class that trades with America.
Yep,
that would change Iran.
Freedom.
I apologize. Yes. Larry, I love you. You know that. I believe that's naive. And
nobody's going to stand.
We have a difference. We have a very significant difference of opinion about that. And again, that's not personal. You know me.
No, please talk.
I significantly don't agree with that ideology at all, especially in reference to Iran, and especially understanding that in the world, especially right now, we have the coalition of China and Russia supporting Iran. So they are working with each other to support each other economically, to avoid sanctions, to get the resources they need for their nations.
Your tactics is what's putting them together.
No,
your
it's
tactics,
not.
us using
no, they
the
definitely
dollar,
aren't my tactics.
Literally bringing them together.
No, my tactics aren't doing that. It's when we reverse the tactics that I do support, which we were seeing under the Trump administration, to some extent, many of the presidents, both Democrats and Republicans, previously, that we are not seeing right now. It is the weakness. What?
What are those specific tactics that you're talking about that you support?
Well, let's return some of the sanctions that we had in place previously.
The sanction deteriorates that middle class, and then they can't fight internally for.
I'm not worried about the middle class. I'm not fighting the middle class. I'm fighting the governments.
Oh,
Right,
but
but the
hold on.
The
government
middle
isn't
class
suffering under
that is
sanctions.
what I'm
Sanctions
supposed to
do not
build up their.
impact the governments.
I
We know
can't
this.
build
This
their
is
nations. I
proven.
can't build their economies. I don't pass laws in their nation. I can't do that.
That's the
That's
basis
for
of
their
development.
people to do.
Hold on. I got it again. I'm gonna give you another example of this. South Africa. I'm gonna give you a second example of success. South Africa. We sanctioned South Africa, and later
Yes.
on they did a bunch of interviews. All the leaders about that, black and white. They did interviews, and they said the sanctions slowed everything down. What made South Africa turn out for apartheid was a black middle class. That is what actually had apartheid fall. It was a black middle class.
Wait a minute,
and when
no,
the black
it was
middle class in
also
South Africa actually grew strong enough, they were able to change their own
Wait a minute,
laws and
you're
their
leaving
own
something
worlds.
out of that.
Hold on one second. That is what got Nelson Mandela out of jail. That is what made
No.
it was a black middle class, and everyone over you can. There's interviews online, you can find them. They all
I
said
understand that.
the sanctions America put on South Africa made it harder for the black middle class in South Africa to grow and therefore to change.
Okay, what you're leaving.
There's
Yes, go
dozens
ahead.
of
Let's
publications
go through
based
in
off of
South
this
Africa, which is
diversity.
about apartheid. So we're
Correct.
talking about the apartheid movement in the
Changing
1980s.
law. Your point. Changing law.
Yes. And what was helpful in doing that? We couldn't change those laws, but what we
Correct.
did do is support many of the African organizations there, and Nelson Mandela. The international pressure coupled with those sanctions allowed the individuals in Africa who were seeking to change their own government to be able to have the momentum and the power to be able to catapult themselves forward, because there was attention on that.
That's there's literally no example of that anywhere. There's no.
Wait a minute, you mean to tell me
there is no evidence of
the ANC, and in particular the ANC, and Nelson Mandela,
which is communist,
how many years was he locked
jailed?
Up? How many years was he locked up for?
27.
That's right, 27 years. And in those 27 years, was it because of the economics that got him out? You're saying the economics,
yes,
for 27 years did not change. Why did the economics change?
No, they did.
Because
they grew slowly because of sanctions. If they would have grown faster, he wouldn't have been in jail so long. They
weren't growing in the first place. It wasn't like there wasn't an African economy in South Africa.
This is not me saying it.
I understand.
But they're boosted by trade. Trade increases GDP and allows them to grow. When there's a strong middle class who are being oppressed, when they have the resources, the time to gather themselves together and fight the ruling regime, that is how the development economics, that's the whole basis behind liberalism.
That's literally the American Revolution.
The ideology.
That's the American Revolution. They were all entrepreneurs.
And that's why we spearheaded that movement.
When we are dealing with certain ideologies in particular, especially as we get more fanatical and we get more religious ideologies out there, you cannot combat that with economics. It does not work. The reason why Iran is the way it is today isn't because of economics, because they were and are one of the richer Middle Eastern nations out there. They always have been. That's not the thing that's holding them back. It's not the economy. It's not the middle class, which they already have. That's not the thing that's holding them back. It is the ideology, and the ideology doesn't care about money. The ideology doesn't care about feelings. It has a simple purpose. And again, I use them as the example because they are one of the most extreme, but they are also one of the most effective. And by the way, one of the reasons why I'm so adamant about this is that they are threatening the United States right now, both because of the quote unquote refugees and other illegal aliens that have been entering the United States through our open southern border, which is why we have identified from the Middle East over 140 known and suspected terrorists that are running around America right now. We have seen many of these individuals that have already committed atrocities, Orlando, in Boulder, Colorado, San Bernardino, several others over the last decade. And this is a direct concern because they are pushing their ideology, which is a religious fanatical
let me touch
ideology.
A couple of these if I could. The first one is I'm not saying there aren't bad guys coming across the southern border. I agree, but I have a whole policy to try to repair
I know.
But my issue here is, again, if we walk away from this, they're going to stop. You're right. The ideology affects them. However, in every single case I just mentioned, to include our own nation, right? Our own nation, it wasn't the oppression. It was economics that got people to actually make that move. You have to be able to get people to be in a position to where they can organize effectively, to where there is an incentive effectively to make that happen. And that's what I want to talk about. Let me quickly bring up a couple of comments if I could.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Charles.
Even that discourse around, ideology and terrorism, though, those people are susceptible to those ideologies because they are not supported. They do not have access to opportunity. They do not have access to community. And that's why they can be indoctrinated. That's why having a strong economy where people are able to prosper, where people are able to pursue their dreams, that's why that's so important to
there should be a one world government
ideologies.
So there should be a one world government where everybody gets to have a socialist.
No, everybody should be able to have their own freedoms and thoughts. You should be able to think whatever you want. It's up until you're oppressing someone else. That's when it has to be stopped.
Here we go. Yeah. Let me grab a couple comments. We have a bunch of comments popping here, so I want to grab it up. Some interesting ones. Jason says, more than 1 million people were slaughtered when the U.S. left Vietnam. Jason is correct. It was a horrible bloodbath when we left. I agree.
Yes.
Same with Afghanistan. We left both countries terribly. I completely agree. My issue is I wish we were never there in the first place.
Yeah.
But I believe in my heart, and this is going to sound horrible, but please, Jason, understand it comes from a place of caring, that in the long run, it was still better for both Vietnam and America. As bad as things happened in Afghanistan, and they're terrible, I think in the long run, it was better that we left. I think in Vietnam, it was better that we left. There were literally millions of people dying in Vietnam when we were there too. I think it's terrible. I'm picking the less crappy of crappy options in my view, but you're correct. It was a bloodbath, and Afghanistan still is bad that we left because we left so poorly. But I still would rather us do that. So yes, let me grab Dave. Dave says trade with communist China didn't make China less communist. However, if we're allowed to trade with Palestine, maybe they'd be less violent. However, the Palestinian government is corrupt. Let me cover all three of those. Trade with communist China did make them less communist. They are less communist, no doubt. They're much more of a capitalist society now than they've ever been. There's much more of a middle class than ever been. Most of the poverty that's been alleviated in the world, the biggest chunk comes out of China. Another chunk comes out of Africa and India. But the biggest chunk, as chunks go for nations, is without question out of China. I do think if we were to trade with Palestine, they would be less violent. I think they would be less violent because they'd have more access
to an economy. Yes. They could prosper and it would be better. The issue that they have is that they do have a corrupt government. I think every government is corrupt because everyone gets corrupted by power. And so these conflicts between governments allow them to appropriate the civilians to a specific side and to a specific agenda to maintain their power. The most common Palestinian that I met while I was in the West Bank would tell me, I wish we could go back to the days when Israelis and we lived together, because they remember that they're still alive, remembering those days. And it wasn't until just recently, since the early 2000s, that it's been illegal for Israelis to go and go to the markets in the West Bank. Before that, in Jericho, they were building a casino because you used to not be able to gamble. You can't gamble in Israel. So they would open casinos, Palestinians would, in the West Bank, and people would come. They used to be a lot more intermingled. They used to. The issue is there was also this underlying racial component of what's happening there as well, because there are Arab Israelis that were not allowed to go to school with white European Israelis until 1992. So there's just this layer of oppression amongst Israelis.
I do want to grab some more comments before you wrap the show up. I want to grab some more comments quick. Roy says slavery ended in America not because of economics. It was in the back of slavery became an economic powerhouse, but because our ideology changed. I would disagree, Roy. I think you're wrong on that one. The reason why there was an end of slavery was because the North was prepared to fight. Why? For labor reasons. Because slaves that didn't know how to do anything couldn't work in factories. Right, this was economic. They wanted
labor. Undermined people's freed
slavery was tertiary
goods. Why would you pay a freed person something when you could just not pay a slave to do that? It was all about economics.
Actually, it was a tertiary. It was like the fifth on the list.
Couldn't unionize and fight for wage equity if there were a whole population of people within your country.
I'm going to disagree with both of you on this.
Slavery was not the primary.
I'm going to say the North doesn't fight the war. if it wasn't for economics.
No, if they were
That's
didn't
what
have
I'm
a
telling you.
middle class that could
that-
sustain itself to go fight, then they never would have fought.
Yes,
That's
They
my
would-
point.
North
The
is-
North doesn't fight the war, and the
Yes,
North doesn't win the war without economics. And if
Wait a
there
minute.
isn't
The
economics to have this fight this war, the North says, South, go ahead, keep
Wait a minute.
slavery, and the North says no.
Wait a minute. The reasons for the war were primarily, you're correct, economic, but slavery was about fifth in the terms of priorities of the things that they were working on at that time. It was
mean the
added
North or the
on
South?
because it would allow them to have more troops to be able to fight against
Hold on,
the
the
South.
North or the
It
South?
was not a primary purpose. It was
Okay,
not one of the primary
purpose
functions.
for the North or the South is what I'm asking you. What are you saying?
I'm
North or
saying
South?
for the North, it was
yes,
not a
correct.
primary focus. In
Correct.
fact, we had seen a week before the declaration of the Fourth Amendment, we had Abraham Lincoln coming out and saying in the New York Times of their day that if it were possible to have the Union come together and be one nation, he would allow slavery if that would make it happen. He was not opposed, as though he personally was an abolitionist, for the purpose of keeping the nation whole for the future. He didn't care if there was slavery or not. It was about keeping the Union together. Again, yes, there's an economic component, but economics was not the purpose of slavery. There are two different issues, somewhat aligned but not connected. There's more to that than what is commonly romanticized about. And
all wars, hold on, this is clear. All wars, almost all wars, begin about power and or economics, but they always end because of morality.
Resources. Even the
American
Crusades,
Civil
you could say
War
was a religious war, but it wasn't. They stole people's resources. The
That was a
Catholics
byproduct of it.
sent people to steal things from other
Yes.
people on the basis that it was about religion. Religion is just a subtool that these leaders use to galvanize people who are not
That is
smart
a
enough to
very-
understand the realities of war, which are based on resources and power.
that is a very opportunistic way of looking at that, because
realist way of
religious
looking
wars
at
have
it.
been happening for as long as religions have existed and human beings have
Yes,
been
but
around.
they've always been about power, not about religion. They then make it religion after.
No, I believe I think that's incorrect.
Look, the 100 Years' War, was it 100 Years' War? 100 Years' War, I think it was in Europe, was about Protestants, or was that 30 Years' War? I forgot which one. One of those wars was about Protestants versus Catholics. I forgot which one it was, but it's one of those two.
I
But
think it
that
was the
wasn't
30s.
because they actually cared about religion. It's because Northern kings didn't want to be under the Pope. That's the real reason for the war. It was
they
power.
taxed them. It was about taxes.
It was power and economics, and then they put the layer of religion on top so the masses would die for kings.
Because they weren't going to die for economics because they didn't have money to begin with. So why would they
Correct.
go to war? Oh, well, it has to be about religion because they'll move for religion. They're not going to move for the money because the money doesn't even matter to them. They can't even conceptualize that at that time.
I
believe it's the same thing over and over again. So when people say that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a religious problem, it's not, because the religion would have been solved before. They have every single kind of religion in both Israeli and Palestinian society.
Well,
it's
Charla,
not about that.
Now is my point. Like it is like at the end of the Civil War, at the end, it was about slavery.
At the end, it became
at the end,
about
it was.
that.
They made it about slavery, right? At the end, the Civil War was actually called the War for Slavery. It didn't start that way.
They made it a moral
started
thing.
In economics.
At the
they
end
made
of
it
the
moral.
They made it moral. They made it identity. They made it religious.
Because we needed a unified way of looking forward in the nation. It had to either have slavery or not have slavery. Again, that's a separate issue. But again, let me reinforce something, because it keeps getting distracted or reimagined, let me say. Instead, Hamas directly said that they are doing this because of their religious beliefs, their hate of a specific religion, regardless of what the people or whatever the individual people, their nation, and the people who are fighting are doing so. And they have stated it clearly and repeatedly that this was about religion. They hate a specific religious group of people. And that is why they want to, and they have made it clear that they will continue to do this because they want to eradicate that religion.
I want to use this purposefully. I'm going to be a little bit hyperbolic purposefully. I am, and have decided that I am, the true king of Spain. I am the king of Spain. It's me. I am the king of Spain.
I love this
And
for you,
I am
Larry.
prepared. I, Larry Sharpe, am prepared as King of Spain. I am prepared to retake my throne because I am the King of Spain. Should Spain be afraid of me right now? Should they arrest me? Should they bomb me? Should they send their special forces into New York to capture me and imprison me? Of course not. I said something, and I said openly, I'm going to retake the throne of Spain. I have announced it publicly in front of you all. I have announced it. And it means nothing. It is something that I just said. Spain should not fear me. They should not come arrest me or bomb me, do anything. It doesn't matter. Iran can say whatever Iran wants to do. Iran has no power to take over America. They're not going to take over our country. They're not going to invade us.
There's not 1,600 bodies behind you saying that. If you said I'm the King of Spain, and because of you saying that, you had your followers decide to commit 1,600 murders,
you're bringing up a really good point. You're bringing up a really good point that we haven't really addressed yet. And I know, I'm not sure if either of you have been to Gaza or been to the wall, but for the last 20 years, there's no way that the Hamas would have just walked through that gate. I'm still quite confused as to how
they didn't walk through the gate. They cut a hole in the gate.
They put holes in the gate, but they had to do tunnels for the Gaza war because you can't just walk through the gate.
Right.
So what happened there?
They didn't go through the gate. They went through the fence.
Right.
They made holes in the fences because
that fence has literally a camera at every end. They have people that are monitoring those fences 24 hours, 7 days a week. This has never happened before. So why did it happen now?
I know why it happened. We talked about it already.
How do prisoners get out of prisons? Because there are individuals who will observe. This is their only job. They observe the patterns.
They walked out that door.
Wait a minute. Let me clarify. You asked the question. I'm trying to answer it. They observe the patterns of the Israelis, the border. They watch for weaknesses, and they test those weaknesses in various little attacks. This is standard military procedure.
Not very big.
You probe against the enemy, you look for weaknesses in their defenses, and then you exploit that, which is what they did.
Are you actually saying that Hamas actually outthought the Mossad?
No, I said the Israeli. I'm saying that Iran.
60 kilometers long.
I'm saying that Iran.
That's it.
Organize this, and yes, that Iran has been working on this through Hamas to.
I don't buy that at all.
I don't care how smart the Mossad is.
Same as
every government has weaknesses.
This is Pearl Harbor and 9/11, right? Neither case, I do not. People are going to get mad at me. I don't think America had anything to do with 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. I don't believe. I know people do. I don't, but I do think America knew both were going to happen and did nothing. That's what I believe. Now, people can be mad at me if they want to, but that is maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist.
There is no perfect
but I believe
defense.
America knew about 9/11 and knew about Pearl Harbor. Yeah, but have you seen their defense in Israel?
Nothing. It's insane.
And I think the Mossad knew this was going to happen and did nothing. Now, the average Israeli got completely screwed. Yeah. Completely screwed.
They did, and it's really sad, and they continue to be screwed every day by this conflict.
But the leadership is doing fine by this. And I think people get mad at me. You think Benjamin Netanyahu will this happen? Yes, I think he's as corrupt as all the rest. Not him specifically, but they're all that bad.
Egypt
I think Iran knows
him 10 days ago. Egypt came forward and said, we told them 10 days before that something big was about to happen. We called Bibi ourselves, and they did nothing.
And they don't care. I don't think the Iranians care that all those Hamas people are going to die. I don't think Iranians care. I don't think the Saudis care. None of them care.
Wait a minute. What right now?
They will sacrifice their own people to maintain power.
There are credible statements right now, credible intelligence reports right now saying that there is going to be something that's going to happen in the United States over the next month, that we should be prepared. So what does that mean? We are getting credible sources and intelligence reports that the United States is going to experience an event of significance. What the hell does that mean? You're saying that Israel has been told by Egypt, an unreliable source, that, something's going to happen really soon. Things are happening all the time. They're constantly being threatened. And you're telling me that doesn't mean, Hamas is about to break through your fence.
I can't buy this one. I can't buy this one.
I'm saying
the strongest militaries in the world. They shot. I watched with my own eyes.
And you're telling me that they are perfect.
So they're perfect. They have perfect defense.
every foot of the country. You look, there's blooms.
You're telling me that they are perfect, that there is no way that this could be done, that no nation in the world can get through their defenses, that they have the perfect defenses. That is.
This isn't a nation.
No,
this is
what I'm telling you is a clearly third-tier military that is infiltrated by Mossad agents. Yes, I'm saying that group could not get past the Mossad. That's what I'm telling you.
And I'm telling you that a fifth-tier military, the Taliban, kicked Joe Biden's butt.
Yes, but he also knew.
So you can't tell me that just because they are inferior doesn't mean that they can't take advantage of opportunities.
I'm saying they all knew. That's my point. I'm not saying they got past Joe either. I think they all knew. I think none of them cared.
You can't compare the Taliban hiding in the mountains, hundreds and thousands of kilometers, versus like a 60-kilometer fence that literally you could walk up and down. Like, okay, my family served in the IDF. Like that's what their job was, to maintain the gates and the lookout huts.
And there is no
no way that they could have gotten through that. I'm telling you.
No, that's just,
and they know that too. And the Israelis aren't dumb. And the ones that have served, they know something's up. They know something's up. And that's going to be Bibi's downfall, because he thought he was going to use this to maintain power, and he's not going to be, because the Israelis aren't stupid.
I think the reverse. I think, Charla, I think you're wrong on this. I think this is going to keep him in power.
Yes, it will.
Because my exact point that I know people don't want to get is this has become religious. And once it becomes religious, people will sacrifice anything for their tribe. Whatever tribe that is, they will sacrifice anything for their tribe.
For Jewish people, everything is religious, though. I think that's different. To say, like, to make something a religious war, I believe both sides need to be believing that their religion, the whole purpose of their religion is to fight each other. I don't think that Palestinians believe that. I think Jewish people believe that it is their religious right and identity to protect themselves, because they have been chosen by God to do so.
No, everyone has a right to defend themselves. Self-defense is an absolute right. Of course, they have a right to defend themselves. This is the reason why
Jewish people try to talk you out of conversion, because they have an identity that is so rooted in their beliefs.
Self-defense is not religious.
Let me be clear.
Not be a part of that.
Let me be clear about this. Is not religious. They're not. Hold on, guys. They're not the only one who do that. Greeks do it too. Greeks are like, we're Greeks. They don't need. You don't got to convert to Greek Orthodox. They're the same way. Many Eastern Orthodox are the same. They're not looking. It's only Protestants and Catholics that are proselytizing. A lot of other religions are not proselytizing at all. Hindus don't ask you to become Hindu, right? Catholics and Protestants proselytize.
But there's
outside of that, most don't.
There's a belief of suffering. So when bad things happen to them, they believe that it is a part of who they are as a people, but chosen by God to take on that suffering. There's just, like, for them, their identity around their religion is so, it's hard to describe, because I don't believe there is any religion like it on the planet in the way that they have had to internalize it, because every time they have been oppressed, and they have been shown that they are right, that this is actually the chosen path from their God.
But I have to walk down this road here.
That by oppressing them.
Here's my point. Regardless of whether that's true or not, I actually don't know enough to tell you if it's true or not. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, regardless of whether it is or not, 1 year from now, there will be no change. And that's what bothers me. 1 year from now, Israel will still not be a one or two party solution. That will not exist a year from now. The Palestinian people will not have an answer for their problem either. Now that will happen. There will still be issues with security on both sides. That will still be true. That will happen in Israel. That will be true in Ukraine. None of it will change, because the leaders need this to be the same.
No.
They will never change.
You know how it could change? Right now, the most important thing that Joe Biden could do is to go over to Saudi Arabia, put the United States pressure, being a leader, to reinforce and to suggest to them that they should continue on the path of peace, to continue the discussion and the accords, the Abraham Accords with Israel, so that they will be able to then put pressure on Iran and really subdue and restrict Iran's ability to continue to fund and to continue to commit these acts of terror. That is the most important foreign policy that we could see coming out of the Biden-Harris administration right now. This is his moment to lead, and he is not doing that. He is not paying attention to what is really the most important thing he could do. You're talking about the future. You want to cut this off at the root. Well, guess what? That means that we need to move forward with the Abraham Accords that were initiated, that have been effective.
I've never said you were wrong on this one, Mike. I'm happy.
I'm not saying you are. I'm being passionate.
Talk to people. I want us talking to more people. I don't want isolation. I want more diplomacy and more trade. The more diplomacy, more trade. Yes. If Abraham Accords opens that up, I'm in. Whatever opens this up, yes. Right? When Trump went to Korea, like I didn't vote for Trump, I'm a libertarian, right? I voted for Gary Johnson, right? So clearly I didn't vote for Trump, but I still give people credit where credit was due. If we can open up trade with any of these countries, yes, and yes. If that were, I'm in. I completely agree. I'm sorry, Charla. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think to the point though, and again, BB could say, well, if our Israelis weren't fighting against me, I could have protected you, which could be the narrative that he tries to portray in that specific instance. But the whole thing that's been propping him into power is that he's saying we've had such low casualty rates during all of these wars. No one can touch you if I'm in power. Well, either he let this happen because he thinks that he can, or this is showing that he actually can't maintain that power and his strategy is failing.
No. What we're seeing is that the nation is coming together.
He's corrupt. I wouldn't be protecting him anyways.
No, he's no more corrupt than any other leader in the world. And you can dispute how much every leader in the world.
I'm not going to fight you.
That's a different question. But he was having actually more problems, and several people in the chat have noted this. Israel was having more problems about some of the changes they were looking to do under Netanyahu prior to this. This is a unifying moment. This is 9/11 for them. This is unifying the United States, very much in the same way that the United States was going through its difficulties in the 2000s and the 1990s. We had a lot of conflict, and we unified very strongly and very uniformly right after 9/11. It's the same thing. So I'm not worried about Netanyahu. And matter of fact, it doesn't matter who the leadership is.
It does matter, though. It really does. Because if it's a right-wing Jewish
wait a minute. Because he's right-wing? That's the problem? Because he's right-wing?
Yes, because that can turn around and come back to bite us later. Any type of authoritarian, radical ideology.
Wait a minute. Right-wing doesn't mean authoritarian. Right wing does not mean authoritarian.
It means you must believe what I believe, or I will put you down. That you are not allowed to move outside of this religious doctrine. That is radical.
You made a false comparison. You have made a correlation that is not correct in any way. Right wing does not mean authoritarian. And that is a dangerous statement when we hear from Joe Biden and the left that they're saying that people who are MAGA, make America great, are extremists and that they are domestic terrorists.
We are hearing this on a regular basis. The right wing in the United States doesn't turn around and say, if you don't convert to yourself to the ideal person that we think you should believe, the things that I believe, that you are allowed, we are not going to oppress or harm you. You don't think that right wing? I think the left is saying that on a regular basis, and I think that's authoritarian. But to your statement, that's not coming from the right. That's coming from the left. No, the left is saying, do whatever you want. Let us do whatever we want. You can have your religion. We can have our religion.
That's not what the left is saying, Charlotte. That's not what the left is saying.
That's not what the left is saying at all.
I live in New York City. That's not what they're saying. The left is saying the left is just look. Michael got upset because you said right wing's bad. I'm not upset because you said right wing's bad.
No, she didn't say bad. She said they're authoritarian. There's a big
authoritarian. Sorry, which I take as bad. But yes, you're right. Correct. Authoritarian. All I'm gonna say is the left's no better. The left is just authoritarian. I see it right now here in New York.
They're passing laws saying that you can't practice your religion.
No, they're not passing laws you can't start your religion. They're passing laws saying you must pay for things I don't want to pay for. If you don't, you will go to jail. They're passing laws saying you must send your kid to my school that will teach you what I tell you, teacher, or I will take your children from you. Yeah. They are, yes. They're not saying I will kill you. Correct. They're saying I will imprison you or I will impoverish you. That's what the left says. They are just as authoritarian as the right. I
don't believe that at all.
Doesn't get good on that.
You haven't read the red flag laws.
Because I'm not getting gay people aren't getting going out and stabbing and killing people on the right. It's the opposite.
Tennessee, yes they do. They're
That
human
was
beings,
one
just like anyone
example
else.
out of thousands, and
Women,
it doesn't
well,
stop
there haven't been
surprising that someone
thousands.
turned around and
First
used
of
the
all-
rights tactics on themselves, since violence is
first of
the
all,
only thing you can really understand on the right.
no. First of all, it's not thousands in the first place because
It
we
is
have the numbers.
thousands of gay people have been killed in the United States for just
Thousands
being
of everyone has been killed in the United
Okay,
States.
hold on.
6,000 black
Hold
men
on. I
get killed
gotta
every
tell
year.
you two pieces. Number one, Charlotte, 1,000 gay people do have more chances of being killed, but yes, but not just because they're gay. That's an assumption being made. That's not always true. Many times they're in. What happens is they happen to be in the black market, where there are more deaths in the black market because there is no control in the black market. Gay people are more actively going in the black market, so are trans people also, than people who are not trans by percentage. So yes, that's accurate. But
do you believe that about women murders as well? Is because we're forced into the black market that we're
no, not at all.
That's
Women are
not
killed
women.
for many
No.
reasons as well.
You said gay, not women.
right. But I would
Not
also say
women.
the right are the ones usually affiliated with killing women as well.
That is
So hold on.
absolutely
You're telling
false.
me that
you cannot make that
husbands
kind of
and
equivocation.
boyfriends who kill their lovers are all right wing, or
No,
even
I didn't
majority
say
right
all. I didn't say all. I said the
Majority?
majority of women are killed
Prove
by
that.
conservative
Prove it.
values that are associated with the right.
Prove it. Show me
wing?
one study.
Religion.
Show me one
Religion.
report that says
I
that.
don't know if I could buy
That
that
is
one.
hyperbolic. That is nothing but propagandist. You cannot say that. That is not even close to anything that can be that is factual. And there is absolutely nothing that documents that. That is just propaganda.
Women being killed. Look. Maybe I'm. Charla, if you've got some data, you are a data person. If you got that, I'd love to see it. My gut tells me the vast majority of women are killed by men, and most of them are killed by men not because of religion, because some man is either trying to dominate them or is angered by them as a boyfriend, girlfriend. That happens
of their
constantly.
belief that they should be able to control women. That belief
No,
is
that's
rooted
not true.
in,
That's
in
utterly
just
not true.
Judeo-Christian
You
values.
You
Yes,
show me
that
some
is-
data on that one.
That is hyperbolic.
Men with broken egos don't have to be right or left. That's just men with broken egos.
Exactly.
I don't know how you. If you could look, I
If
don't
you
want to
Show
say
me
you're
the
wrong.
data.
the
Show me the
media
data
that
on
they
that.
subscribe to,
Yes.
it's completely right-wing media.
Show me the data.
I will
I
show
haven't
you
seen
the
any
data. I will
source.
bring it next week.
Show me any
Okay, good.
credible source that has
All right,
that
so
because it doesn't exist.
We now have our topic for next week. We already have it already. I have to see data on that one, Charlotte. I have to. That one I got to see data on that one. I think men kill for many reasons. Now, when it
Yes.
comes to mass murder, that's often ideologically, or that's very often that. Mass murder is often that, right? Like the killing
Mass
of
murder has
Jews,
38
obviously
different reasons why it
was
happens.
obviously ideology. So that's often true. But an individual man killing an individual woman, I need data on that one. That's all I'm
You
saying.
don't think
All
that
right,
there's
guys,
an association between conservative ideologies and the
No,
patriarchy?
no, I don't.
I do not.
And if anything,
No.
I can make the same argument about the left easily, but I don't do that because it's hyperbolic. It's just it's
But
propaganda.
there's a separate piece I brought up, though. The left often isn't about killing. The left is about destroying you other ways. The left isn't about
they
the
kill
left is about
too.
taking away your children.
They
The left
kill
is
too.
about taking away your money. The left is about imprisoning you.
They
The
kill
left is
too.
about that. Kill too,
They kill.
yes, but she's right. When it comes to actual murder, I think the right is more apt to actually kill. That's true.
I don't
The
believe
left
that.
is more apt to hurt you some other way, imprison, economically destroy
Use
you.
the system to control. I could understand that because
Correct.
the more left you go, the more into socialism you get, and that's their tools
100%.
of control would be the government and those
Correct.
types of things.
No,
Yes.
socialism has killed more
Absolutely
people.
true.
Look,
Yes.
I wanna
I
get
see the
into-
left as being
I do believe
authoritarian.
socialism has killed people.
I'm
100%.
not questioning that. I said I just wasn't even going to touch it, but yeah, it absolutely has.
Yes.
It's not.
But
and
anyway.
again, that's factual.
Anyway, my point being, we are late. I've kept you late again, Joel. I tried. Our show is just too short. I tried. I will let you go. You have something you have to do. I get it. We have our topic for next week. Anything we want to talk about? Any last words before we go? Michael, anything?
Believe it or not, there's the New York City mayor's race is heating up, and I'm going to be speaking with one of the first declared candidates in the next couple of days.
There we go. Awesome. Charlotte, anything you want to bring up?
Nope. Just check out my new book, I Love Drugs, An Ethnography of America's Addiction, to talk a little bit more about the opiate crisis in the United States.
There we go, guys. Follow them. Please follow Michael at MV Consult on Twitter. Please follow Charla on Instagram at Venture Novelist on Instagram. Guys, please hit that like button if you liked it. If you thought it was good, please click it. It does matter. If you can share this out on Twitter, it'd be great. It really does matter a lot. I hope you're enjoying the show. I will see you.